For regular videos on ancient cultures and forgotten civilizations, please subscribe.
The legend of the 9 tripod cauldrons, or Juding. They're one of ancient China's most fascinating mysteries. Despite being mentioned in various texts, they have never been seen. These cauldrons symbolized the ruler's authority and were used in ritual sacrifices. But after the fall of the Zhou dynasty in the 3rd century BCE, the cauldrons vanished. One legend states that a dragon took them away in a river. Whatever the case, the whereabouts of the cauldrons remain unknown, and so the mystery of the 9 tripod cauldrons continues to captivate both the public and scholars. But will they ever be discovered? And why are they considered so valuable? Let's find out. The 9 cauldrons, it is said, were made of bronze, and while they were still around, various ruling dynasties of ancient China all tried to get their hands on them until they disappeared in the 3rd century BCE. Their earliest known mention comes from a speech made by Wang Sun Man in the Zhou, a commentary on the Spring and Autumn Annals, traditionally attributed to a man named Zhou. The Spring and Autumn Annals are one of the 5 classics of ancient China, and the Zhou commentary, published in the late 4th century BCE, covers Chinese history and culture between 722 and 468 BCE. So it's a very old text. Here is what we're told. In 605 BCE, during the reign of the Zhou dynasty, a warlord from the state of Chu attacked the Zhou capital at Luoyang. The king of Zhou sent a minister, Wang Sun Man, with gifts for the warlord. The general had other priorities, so he asked the minister, "Could you tell me how heavy are the 9 tripods?" This seemingly mundane question prompted a detailed response from Wang Sun Man, giving us an insight into why the ancient Chinese valued the 9 cauldrons. Wang Sun Man says, "The tripods do not matter. Virtue does. In the past, when the Xia dynasty," that's China's first dynasty, "was distinguished for its virtue, the distant regions put their things into pictures, and the 9 provinces sent in copper, or bronze, as tribute. The tripods were cast to present those things. 100 different things were presented, so that the people could distinguish divine from evil. Hereby a harmony was secured between the high and the low, and all enjoyed the blessing of heaven." Now, looking at the beginning of Wang Sun Man's response carefully, you will see the term things used. What are these things? Earlier historians associated them with totems, emblems, or symbols, but a modern interpretation says that Wang Sun Man used the term things metaphorically to show the submission of different rulers to Yu the Great. These vassal lords became allies of the Xia. The phrase, "so that the people could distinguish divine from evil," tells us the rulers who submitted to the Xia were seen as divine by the people of China, and those who didn't submit were evil. Wang Sun Man continues, "When the virtue of Jie, the last king of the Xia, was all obscured, the tripods were transferred to the Shang dynasty, and for 600 years the Shang enjoyed its ruling status. Finally, King Zhou of the Shang proved cruel and oppressive, and the tripods were transferred to the Zhou dynasty. When virtue is commendable and brilliant, those which are small will be heavy. When things come to be crafty and decrepit, those which are large will be light. Heaven blessed intelligent virtue, and on this its favor rests. King Shang of Zhou fixed the tripods in the Zhou capital and divined that the Zhou dynasty should last for 30 reigns, over 700 years. This is the Zhou's mandate from heaven. Though now the Zhou has lost its past glory, the decree of heaven is not yet changed. The weight of the tripods cannot yet be inquired about." What can we learn from this exchange? Historians have analyzed the speech by Wang Sun Man to find the meaning and symbolism of the 9 cauldrons. The most vital information we can conclude from this speech is that the 9 tripod cauldrons were made to commemorate one of the most important political events of ancient China, the founding of the Shang dynasty, the first centralized Chinese state. Before the Shang, various regional groups fought for political dominance, and there was no stability in China. Yu the Great, the founder of the Shang dynasty, is credited with controlling floods and starting dynastic rule in China in 2070 BCE. The Great Flood of Gunyu devastated the country. Yu reduced people's suffering by constructing dams, dikes, and digging channels, thus managing the flood. In one version of the legend, after he controlled the flood, Yu divided the land into 9 provinces. Each province was required to pay him tribute in the form of bronze. He collected the bronze and had them melted and cast as 9 tripod cauldrons. But elsewhere, it is said that it was Yu's son Qi of Shang who collected the bronze from the 9 provinces and made them into cauldrons. Each cauldron weighed up to 30,000 cattle, or approximately 7.5 tons. During the Shang dynasty, which succeeded the Shang, they established strict rules on the use of the 9 tripod cauldrons. Members of the scholarly gentry could use up to 3 cauldrons. The Shang permitted the ministers of state usage of up to 5 vessels, and the vassal lords could use up to 7. Only the king, who ruled by the mandate of heaven, could use all 9 cauldrons. The mandate of heaven is a well-known concept in Chinese history, symbolizing the belief that a king's power is granted by divine forces. According to this belief, the mandate can be transferred based on the righteousness of the ruling lineage. If the current ruler becomes corrupt, the powers of heaven would withdraw their mandate and pass it on to a more worthy successor. So the 9 tripods were not only made to signify the beginning of centralized power, but also legitimize the control of the king over the entire country. We don't know whether the legend is true, but the symbolism of the 9 cauldrons as the hallmark of centralized power and a righteous ruler is obvious from the legend. The weight of the cauldrons also tells us something about the bronze manufacturing done in ancient China at that time. Archaeologists studying ancient Chinese bronzes explained that making a single bronze vessel was a very time-consuming and demanding process. It involved several steps: conceptualizing the final product, mining the copper and the tin ores, smelting the ores to create the bronze alloy, molding the desired vessel, finally casting the piece. So vessels made of bronze were highly valued at that time. Ritual bronzes in China were called zhongqi, meaning heavy vessels. So the weight of the vessel reflected the strength of the ruler, and the weight of the vessel reflected the value of the vessel. Now remember the question that the warlord asked the minister. He asked him, how much do the cauldrons weigh? Now you might wonder about that question. Well, Man answers the question, saying that during times of virtue, even the smallest vessels would be heavy. If the ruler was just and performed his duties, even the tiniest vessels would weigh a lot, thus reflecting his authority and the mandate of heaven. But if he was full of greed and his allies were crafty and decrepit, the largest vessels would become light, thus symbolizing a loss of power. The warlord wanted to know how heavy the cauldrons were to see how strong the authority of the king was, and what his chances were. As you can see from the minister's response, the 9 tripod cauldrons changed hands from the Shang to the Shang and finally to the Zhou dynasty. So by asking about the weight, he wanted to know if the king still had the mandate of heaven, and if he didn't, then it might be a good time to attack the Zhou capital, or maybe it's a good idea to withdraw his forces. During the Shang, Shang, and early Zhou dynasties, bronze vessels played the role of ritual objects. But in the middle of the Zhou reign, the function of bronze shifted from ritual to political ceremonial vessels. How do we know this? Though the vessels retained the shape of ritual objects, like the tripod cauldrons did, and goblets and basins and all that, the inscriptions cast on them, though, were different. Inscriptions on the vessels tell us of kings appointing government officials. Scholars have called such vessels investiture bronzes. The investiture bronze is a special kind of bronze object that represents an official appointment and shows that the person holding it has been given authority by the king. These vessels, which symbolize the king's authority, are similar to the 9 tripod cauldrons that symbolize the mandate of heaven. The investiture bronzes changed the way royal authority was used in ancient China. The bronze vessels became objects that represented the ruler's authority and the subject's loyalty to the ruler. When we talk about bronze vessels being passed from one ruler to another, or from a king down to his underlords, right? This is a reflection of a powerful dynasty being able to undertake large-scale bronze making. Bronze making, as we discussed, was a labor-intensive process, so a state that could manage such a process had a strong ability of social organization and therefore central authority. The political symbolism of the 9 tripod cauldrons would have been sustained over many centuries through ancestral sacrifices. Since only a royal could conduct a sacrifice, the user of the cauldrons was the natural inheritor of that power. Okay, so then what happened to the cauldrons? Here's what we know. In 290 BCE, the Qin dynasty attacked the Zhou. And according to a work called The Intrigues of the Warring States, a collection of political and war strategies employed between the 5th and 3rd centuries BCE, and believed to have been compiled between the 3rd and 1st centuries BCE, the Qin were hoping the Zhou would hand over the 9 cauldrons. But the Qin failed in their mission. Political maneuvering by the Zhou minister Yan Shui allowed the Zhou to keep the cauldrons. China's grand historian Sima Qian, writing in the 1st century BCE, says that after the fall of the Zhou dynasty in 256 BCE, the cauldrons were lost in the Si River. When the first emperor Qin Shi Huangdi unified China in 221 BCE, bringing an end to the Warring States period, he says, the cauldrons magically appeared in the river. Qin Shi Huang was overjoyed. He ordered 1,000 men to recover the cauldrons. The Qin men secured them with ropes and were about to haul them out when a dragon appeared and bit the cord to pieces. The cauldrons disappeared into the waters, never to be seen again. Another story says that the cauldrons became light and flew away. And this has been interpreted by some to mean that when Chuanrong nomads captured the Zhou capital in 771 BCE, they confiscated the cauldrons and took them. Now, mind you, this would have been long before the time of Wang Sun Man, so if this indeed was the case, we would have to assume that Wang Sun Man was lying and trying to mislead the warlord of Chu to prevent an attack on the Zhou capital. He never had possession of the cauldrons at all. One theory, which is more mundane, is that the 9 cauldrons were melted down and made into coins during the last days of the Zhou dynasty. Interestingly, later Chinese rulers continued to revere the symbolism of the cauldrons and recast them. The most famous examples are Empress Wu Zetian in 697 CE and Huizong, emperor of the Song dynasty, in 1105. To date, none of the cauldrons have been found archaeologically. But interestingly, in 1939, near the Wuguan village in Henan province, a rectangular 4-legged ding cauldron was found, known as the Homuwu ding. It was rather large and weighed in at 833 kilograms, that's about 1,836 pounds. It bore an inscription, Queen Mother Wu. This tells us that the cauldron belonged to Fu Jing, the queen of the Shang ruler Wu Ding. He reigned in the 14th century BCE. This is likely not one of the original 9 cauldrons forged by Yu the Great, but it shows that the Chinese were making large bronze cauldrons in the Shang period, and it gives us a glimpse of what they may have looked like. There's a strong chance ancient Chinese historians were talking about cauldrons that actually existed. But will they ever be found? Or are they destroyed and lost forever? We can only guess. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you would like to support the channel and help keep it alive, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/worldofantiquity. Or if you want to make a one-time contribution, you can do so with a super thanks.
You might like my little e-booklet, Why Ancient History Matters. It's designed to persuade people that the subject is important, even in the modern world. You might also wish to use it to help spread the word, so feel free to share it with someone you know. It's free for anyone who wants it. I've left a link in the description box below the video for you to grab a copy. Catch you later.